Welcome to ComicLingo. Watch, listen, read, and feel English naturally through manga-style dialogue and engaging storytelling. Today, let's dive into a recently popular novel, Surviving as the Tyrant's Chef, Chapter 1 to 10. Chapter 1, The Book. His Majesty approaches. The resonant voice of the Sangseon, head of the eunuch department, echoed through the hall, and the assembled civil and military officials in Junjeongun bowed their heads in unison, a rustle of deference filling the air. Silence descended, heavy and expectant, over the vast chamber. At its center, elevated on the highest dais, stood the dragon throne. A man strode toward it with bold, purposeful steps. Draped carelessly in a crimson silk robe embroidered with golden dragons, he was the undeniable focal point of this space, indeed, of the entire kingdom. Everything revolved around him. The high-ranking officials, adorned in their ceremonial caps and sashes, fixed their attention on him, hanging on the edge of anticipation. What command would fall from his lips? It was no small thing, his words had shifted the course of the nation's affairs more than once. No, more than that. Perhaps, at this very moment, one among them might lose their head. A tense, prickling silence stretched on, like sitting on a cushion of thorns, until at last, the man's voice rumbled low, reverberating through the hall. Remarkable. His first words, delivered as he lounged upon the throne. Soft yet sweet, sharp yet thrilling, tart yet refreshing, with a hint of the briny woven into its vibrant harmony, a new sensation, embracing every contradiction in balance. The officials, heads still bowed, could not see his expression. His voice alone carried the weight of his thoughts, sensual, fervent, like a young poet reciting verse. And so, we have decided. Shying. The chilling sound of a sword being drawn sliced through the stillness of the hall. It was said to be his habit, wasn't it? To personally unsheath his blade at moments of great import. The man in the crimson dragon robe stepped forward, the gleaming edge of his sword flashing as he moved. He stopped before a lone woman, kneeling like an isolated island in the desolate expanse of the hall's stone floor. This woman, here and now. As the cold glint of the blade reflected on the ground, the woman squeezed her eyes shut. Was this how she would meet her end? But then. Shall be appointed as the Yeonsan-gun of the royal kitchen. The unexpected words rang out. Yeonsan-gun? The highest chef in the palace, tasked with preparing the king's meals? Murmurs of shock rippled through the officials filling the hall, but the man in the crimson robe paid them no mind, continuing as if their whispers were irrelevant. From this day forward, you shall cook for us without fail. However, his voice sharpened. Should you serve the same dish even once, you will face the severest punishment? Know this. The woman's mind reeled, dizziness overtaking her. This strange place, this bewildering situation, and this man standing before her, his sword pointed in her direction, clad in his crimson dragon robe. Where had it all gone wrong? Was it from that day, now a distant memory, though it was only a few days ago? Beep beep beep. Sync minutes of Anhltl.hct. 5 minutes remaining. The mechanical announcement blared, and the scoreboard lit up. A cacophony of foreign languages buzzed in the ears of contestant number 32, Yeonsan-gun. But she couldn't afford to lose focus now. Breathe. Slowly. Just as you prepared. Yeonsan steadied herself with a deep breath and turned up the heat on the induction range. The dish was nearly complete, searing the surface at high heat would seal the deal. But the red indicator light, which should have flared to life, remained dim. Something was wrong. She pressed the button repeatedly, but the range refused to heat. It's broken. The realization hit her like a jolt, her fingertips trembling. Less than 5 minutes remained. Excuses about faulty equipment wouldn't hold water here. She had to finish the dish, no matter what. There's only one way. Jaeon opened a wooden box on the table, pulling out the contents. Hanji paper and straw rope, used to pack ingredients she'd brought from Korea. She rubbed the rope between her palms, unraveling it into loose straw, then stuffed it into a pot along with scraps of the hanji. Igniting a torch, she set the bundle ablaze, and flames leapt up, smoke curling into the air. She'd heard that starting a fire in a studio filled with lighting and camera equipment was against the rules. But was this really the time to worry about regulations? "Hey, what are you doing?" a staff member with a headset rushed over, voice sharp with alarm. Jaeon snapped back, "Can't you see? I'm cooking." That stubborn, bull-headed streak, the one she'd been criticized for countless times at culinary school, reared its head. Ignoring the stunned staff member, she placed a small grill over the burning straw in the pot. She laid her prepared ingredients on top and covered it with a lid. Hiss. The sound of the ingredients searing over the straw fire filled the air. Sweat beaded on Jaeon's forehead. 1 minute remaining. Time for the garnish. She stirred a velouté sauce, a creamy blend of cream and bean broth, until it frothed like velvet, then spooned it onto the dish. Next, she delicately placed a tuile, a thin, crisp wafer made with misuguru, atop the sauce, letting it float like a leaf on water. Now, the final touch, her secret weapon. She opened a jar, and a sweet, fragrant aroma burst forth, so potent it drew sidelong glances from the neighboring station. Scooping a spoonful of the golden, viscous liquid, she drizzled it over the dish, painting an abstract masterpiece on the plate. Beep. The signal for the end sounded. This was Paris, France. The studio where the Cuisinier d'Or, the world's most prestigious culinary competition, was being broadcast live. Chefs from over 50 countries had poured their all into their dishes within the tight time limit, and the battle had just concluded. And there, at the heart of it all, stood contestant number 32, Yoon Jaeon, the only Korean participant. That man. As the judging panel ascended the stage to evaluate the dishes, Jaeon's breath caught. Among them was a white-haired man, his gaze sharp and discerning, examining her dish as if appraising a priceless porcelain artifact. Countless chefs revered him as an idol, the living god of cuisine, Alain Bocuse. From this moment on, every judgment rested solely in his hands. His approach to food was nothing short of divine. As he placed a morsel in his mouth, closing his eyes to savor it like a fine vintage wine, rolling it slowly, deliberately, he exuded an aura that hushed the onlookers. Every taste bud, every nerve in his palate and nose, seemed mobilized to dissect the dish, its texture, its aroma, its essence. Yet, that was all. No words of critique followed, no shift in his expression betrayed his thoughts. "God, I'm so nervous I might pass out." The closer his meticulous, cold appraisal came to her table, the faster Jaeon's heart raced. When her turn finally arrived, she caught sight of the staff member who had scolded her earlier, whispering something into Bocuse's ear. She didn't need to hear it to know, undoubtedly, they were reporting her use of forbidden straw fire in the studio. Her stomach churned with dread, but outwardly, she maintained a calm, steady voice. Hanwoo beef, cooked sous vide and braised with shiitake mushrooms in a 300-year-old heirloom soy sauce, then smoked over straw fire. The dish is finished with a sauce made from tangerine extract, fermented for 4 years from a 500-year-old tangerine tree. A flicker of intrigue briefly crossed the face of the god of cuisine as he listened to her explanation. He scooped a spoonful of her dish, placed it in his mouth, and closed his eyes. The brief moment he savored it stretched agonizingly, Jaeon's nerves fraying with each passing second. Then, abruptly, he opened his eyes. For a fleeting instant, Jaeon felt their gazes lock, his piercing blue eyes meeting hers. A cryptic, unreadable expression played across his face before he turned, impassive, and moved to the next table. What happened next felt like a dream. This year's Cuisinier d'Or champion, Mademoiselle Yoon Jaeon from Korea. The following day, headlines across the world trumpeted the name of an unfamiliar Korean woman. Beneath them, Alain Bocuse's critique was quoted, This young female chef from Korea has connected two worlds, ancient Korea and modern France, through her cuisine. That connection delivers an astonishing experience, pulling the diner into an entirely new realm. Is this Yoon Jae-on? A stiff voice crackled through the phone. The Korean number suggested another media outlet. Yes, that's me. I'm sorry, but could we do interviews via email? Jae-on responded half-heartedly, rummaging through the chaos of her room for clothes. Her phone had been ringing with interview requests since morning, but she had no time to waste. She was preparing for a meeting with Anhltl.hct team, who had offered her the position of sous chef at his Michelin 3-star restaurant, the dream of every chef worldwide. As she slipped into a sharp blazer and glanced at her reflection, the voice on the other end of her earbuds continued. Your father is Yeonsan-gun, correct? Yes, that's right. A strange unease settled over her. Why were they asking about her father? Her gaze drifted to a small framed photo on her desk, a teenage Jae-young in her school uniform, standing beside a stern-faced, middle-aged man in horn-rimmed glasses. A moderately well-known historian, often featured on educational TV programs, but to Jae-young, he was distant, unapproachable. Buried in old books, uninterested in anything else, she thought. It had started after her mother's sudden death. Her father had thrown himself into his research on ancient texts with an almost obsessive fervor. And then, that incident happened. In his study, Jae-young had stumbled upon an old book he'd been translating, Manhwa, The Record of Cloud Gazing. Found in a dusty pile at a Hwanghaekdong bookstore, its author unknown, the book contains something unimaginable, a collection of recipes from a bygone era. What is this feeling? From that day, the book's contents haunted her, circling endlessly in her mind. Eventually, she began recreating its recipes, watching centuries-old instructions come to life through her hands. It was as if the book's long-dead author guided her across time and space. That experience had changed her life irrevocably. If I get a perfect score on the college entrance exam, you said I could live my life as I choose, right? She had declared, waving her flawless transcript. Her choice, to forego university and study cuisine in France. That day, her father slapped her for the first time, and she stormed out of the house. That was 7 years ago. She had vowed never to return to Korea. What's this about? She asked the voice on the phone. I'm sorry to break this to you so suddenly, the voice was dry, clinical. Your father, Yeonsan-gun, has fallen into a coma. On the highway to Charles de Gaulle Airport, Jae-young pressed the accelerator. The Parisian sunset glinted in the rearview mirror of her rental car. How could she describe this feeling? The voice on the phone had warned that her father might not survive more than a few days. She had thought herself detached, that their severed bond would leave her unmoved. Yet, her heart was a tangle of emotions. That book he found, it's what led to all of this. Her memories were inextricably tied to the Manhwa, to the moment she first read its faded pages. From her days chopping vegetables in culinary school to last night's victory celebration, and now this sudden call about her father, a cascade of memories flashed by like a panorama. Alan Boca's words about connecting two worlds echoed in her mind. Perhaps it wasn't her, but her father's book that bridged those realms. There's something I never got to tell him. If she returned to Korea, would she find the words she'd always owed him? At that moment, a searing pain stabbed through her head, sharp as a blade. This was no ordinary headache, she knew it instinctively. A piercing ache burrowed deep into her brain's core. Her vision blurred. Images flooded her mind, the weathered text of the Manhwa, vibrant French dishes, and a rush of memories spinning like a kaleidoscope, merging into a grotesque collage of modern art. A storm of shock surged through her, and then, like a fuse blowing under overload, her consciousness faded. The last thing she saw was the blaring horn and the blinding headlights of an oncoming truck. A sea of pitch-black darkness. Jae-young's naked form floated slowly upward within it. The still surface reflected her like a mirror. As her body rose, drawing closer to her own reflection, the two Jeongs converged at the water's edge. Gasp! With a sharp breath, she jolted awake, water spilling from her lungs as she sat up. She coughed violently, expelling the liquid in ragged heaves. This was an unfamiliar place. She vaguely recalled the moments before the crash on the Paris highway. Had the impact thrown her from the car, leaving her to drift to this strange shore? She touched her body, astonished to find no injuries. But the true shock came next. What? A group of people stood at a distance, encircling her. Their appearance stopped her cold. Clad in tattered, historical garments like those from a period drama, unkempt beards, disheveled topknots with stray hairs jutting out, they clutched torches under the twilight sky, whispering among themselves. They were unmistakably people of the Joseon era. Where am I? Bewildered, Jeong sensed it faintly. She had been brought to a place impossibly far, a world her logic couldn't connect to. Just as fate had once led her from Seoul to France, it had now drawn her to an even stranger realm. Chapter 2: The Ghost Woman. What's this talk of a ghost woman? Good heavens, I saw her with my own eyes, my lord. And not just me, every soul in the village saw her too. Hair all loose, wearing strange clothes, what else could she be but a ghost woman? Quiet, you fool. Spouting nonsense about apparitions. Hong Yeongguk snapped, though he was already tying his hat strings, preparing to head out. The villager's face was still etched with unease. Isn't this a sign of some great calamity? We must report to the governor at once. Enough! Hong Yeongguk cut him off. The old saying warns against speaking of monstrous forces and spirits. If such talk reaches the governor's ears, you'll all be in for a thrashing, do you understand? With a final glare, Hong Yeongguk adjusted his official robes and swept out the gate, his coattails billowing. He dismissed the matter loudly, but something nagged at him. He needed to see it for himself. The villager trailed behind, muttering like a drenched dog. My lord, I tell you, it's an ill omen. A famine this year, or a fishing boat capsized, something's bound to go wrong. Hong Yeongguk barely listened, climbing onto the horse waiting in front of the governor's office. He turned to the servant beside him. Deokshul, go to the office now and tell the duty officer to gather the guards. At this hour, my lord? Why the guards? Deokshul asked, startled. If this stranger was swept here by the current, they might be a shipwrecked drifter, best case. But what if they're a pirate or a remnant of the Japanese raiders? Pirates? Japanese? Deokshul's eyes widened, and he scurried off, urgency in his steps. The villager, overhearing, gaped, his eyes round as coins. See? I knew something was brewing. Hold your tongue, fool, or you'll be the first to regret it. Hong Yeongguk growled, yanking the reins with a sharp haya. The sturdy horse from the Gyeonggi governor's stable galloped off, its hooves thundering into the distance. Hey, can you understand me? Hello? Jeong, soaked to the bone, dragged herself toward the shore. Each step she took made the villagers murmur and shuffle back a pace. It wasn't fear of her appearance so much as the wariness one might feel toward an unfamiliar creature. You speak Korean, right? Where am I? Please, say something. Snatches of their voices reached her ears. The words weren't entirely clear, but they were familiar, archaic, like dialogue from a historical drama. Is this a film set? A drama? Whatever it is, it's incredibly realistic. In every way. Jeong forced a smile, trying not to provoke them as she edged closer. But the villagers' guarded expressions didn't soften. Suddenly, a bellow cut through the air. Halt! At the command, the villagers in their coarse, homespun clothes dropped to the ground, bowing low in a wave of submission. Jaeyoung alone remained standing, bewildered. The reason became clear soon enough. A dozen guards clad in black jackets, spears in hand, surged forward, surrounding her. Behind them, a man in a wide-brimmed hat sat astride a horse, his voice ringing with authority. "I am Hong Yeong-guk, deputy to the Gyeonggi governor. Stranger, explain yourself, why have you washed up here? Speak plainly." From his perch, Hong Yeong-guk's sharp gaze bore down on her. The spear-wielding guards mirrored his suspicion. "Well, I'm not entirely sure, but I think I was in a car accident, in France, on the highway to the airport." Jaeyoung's words tumbled out in a jumbled mess, her attempted explanation faltering. The villagers, still prostrate, and the guards, gripping their spears, exchanged puzzled looks. Even the man on horseback seemed baffled. Clearly, none of them fully grasped her words. "Strange speech," Hong Yeong-guk remarked. "A dialect I've never heard. First, tell me where you're from." Jaeyoung realized she needed to ease their suspicion. Answering quickly seemed the best approach. "I'm Korean. A citizen of South Korea." "South Korea?" Hong Yeong-guk frowned. "Is there such a place?" "Perhaps a small nation in the southern barbarian lands," the duty officer, wearing a military cap, whispered to Hong Yeong-guk. "I've heard there are many tiny island nations south of Ryukyu." Hong Yeong-guk nodded, as if it made sense. "Very well. Since you seem to speak our tongue, I'll ask again. How did you come from this South Korea to the land of Joseon? Speak the truth." Jaeyoung had a mountain of questions herself, but their relentless interrogation left her at a loss. Simplicity seemed her only option. "Well, I was in a traffic accident. You know, a crash? Cars colliding? And somehow, I ended up here." She gestured awkwardly, trying to keep it clear, but a villager, still bowing, suddenly shouted, "She's a ghost woman. Look at her strange appearance and cunning speech, she speaks our tongue too well. I've lived decades and never seen such a thing." As if on cue, murmurs erupted among the villagers. "A ghost woman. An ill omen. The taxes are already crushing us, if a famine hits, we'll all starve. Something terrible is coming. We must throw her back into the water, the spirits are angry." The crowd's unrest grew, rooted in palpable fear. What are they so afraid of? Jaeyoung wondered, panic rising. "Silence!" Hong Yeong-guk's roar cut through the clamor. The duty officer beside him drew his sword with a chilling shine, and the crowd fell silent, as if doused with cold water. These were people of the dynastic age, conditioned to obey the ruling class. But their quiet was temporary. Jaeyoung could sense their resentment simmering, ready to boil over. "We can't leave this as is," Hong Yeong-guk said. "We cannot deal with a stranger without proper interrogation. Take her to the governor's office. Move. Bind her with ropes," the duty officer barked. The guards rushed forward, swiftly tying Jaeyoung with coarse cords. Something had gone terribly, catastrophically wrong. Jaeyoung sat in a cell filled with straw, reminiscent of a barn, her mind racing. This wasn't just a mistake, it was a disaster. She had been driving on the Paris outskirts toward the airport. Then came the blinding headache. That was the last thing she remembered. And now, she was here. How Jaeyoung had come from France to this place was a mystery, but an even greater question swirled in her mind. Is this really the Joseon era? At first, she'd wondered if this was a film or drama set, if these people were meticulously trained actors. But as she was brought to the Gyeonggi governor's office, that notion crumbled. Not a single modern building had crossed her path. No cars, no motorcycles, just the occasional ox cart or donkey led by wandering merchants. Have I truly been transported to the Joseon era? She asked herself repeatedly, but no matter how unbelievable it seemed, she couldn't deny what her eyes saw. When she asked the guards what year it was, they only replied that it was the Gapja year. In Joseon, commoners marked time by the 60-year cycle, so expecting more precise answers was futile. She could only guess it was one of the many Gapja years in history. But knowing the exact year was less urgent than another question: is there a way back to my own time? She had been rushing back to Korea upon hearing her father was in a coma, only to end up in this unthinkable place. She had to find a way back, and soon. As she pondered, her gaze drifted to the moon visible through the wooden bars of her cell. Its serene glow offered a flicker of courage. That moon, at least, shone the same in every place, every era, its light a constant in an uncertain world. Tomorrow will likely be a long day. Han Yeong-guk, deputy to the Gyeonggi governor, stared at the moon hanging in the night sky, his heart heavy. Tomorrow, he would have to host important guests. The Gyeonggi governor, Hong Guedel, his father, was a respected figure in the royal court, and as his son, Yeong-guk was expected to handle the reception. But the occasion promised to be a bed of thorns. The guests visiting tomorrow are notorious corrupt officials, wielders of fearsome power. A deep furrow creased Yeong-guk's brow. His father's rigid, principled nature had earned him many enemies, a fact well known in the court. That was why Yeong-guk had no desire to let the evening's commotion near Mapleport spiral into something larger. If rumors of a ghost woman emerging from the water spread, it could be used as an excuse to accuse us of failing to govern the people. For now, he had confined the stranger to a cell and ordered the villagers to keep silent, hoping to prevent any trouble. So, father, what did this stranger look like? A clear, childlike voice pulled Yeong-guk back to the present. Before him sat a pretty girl with neatly braided hair, his 13-year-old daughter, her eyes sparkling with curiosity. She was always asking him about the ways of the world. "I've never seen such a peculiar figure," he replied. She wore a strange jacket and tight trousers, with curly hair left loose. No wonder the villagers mistook her for a ghost woman. That's so fascinating. Where did she say she was from? She mentioned a place called South Korea. From what I've heard, it might be some small island nation in the south. His daughter's innocent curiosity warmed his heart, but it also deepened his unease. Tomorrow's guests were the infamous father and son Sehong, Minister of Works, and his son, Sung-jae, the Chief Royal Secretary. They were known as the vilest of corrupt officials, whose schemes had ruined countless households. Please, let there be no trouble. As Yeong-guk gazed at his daughter's guileless face, his own expression grew ever grimmer. Chapter 3, Entertaining Guests, 1. Two men on horseback rode toward Denuomen, the western gate of Hanyang's fortress walls. Their silk robes shimmered with vibrant hues, their hat strings adorned with jade beads, an ostentatious display of high status. The armored guards at the gate recognized them at a glance and bowed deeply, as if their spines might snap. His Majesty's worries seemed to grow by the day, the older man muttered to himself, urging his horse forward. The younger man trailing behind responded, "Is it not because disloyal subjects hide their true intentions, harboring duplicity? A rotten fruit must be plucked swiftly, lest it spoils the rest," the older man said cryptically. As if he'd been waiting for those words, the younger man's lips curled into a subtle smirk. "I've heard that hosting guests is the foundation of a nobleman's duty. Is not attending court or receiving foreign envoys much the same as hosting? If so, there may well be ways to sift out those whose character falls short of a true noble's standards." "Ha, well said," the older man, Sehong, Minister of Works, stroked his beard and laughed heartily. His eyes, however, glinted like a raptor eyeing prey. "Now I'm all the more curious to see how our esteemed Gyeonggi Governor Hong will fare in hosting us." "Indeed," replied Sung-jae, the Chief Royal Secretary trailing him, his own gaze flickering with a strange intensity. "Disaster, my lord." A servant girl from the Gyeonggi governor's office dashed across the courtyard toward the men's quarters, her voice urgent. "My lord, we're in trouble." "What's happened?" Hong Yeonsan-gun emerged, half opening the sliding door, his upper body visible. He was in the midst of dressing formally for the imminent arrival of distinguished guests. It's the kitchen, my lord." "Something's gone wrong." "What do you mean, gone wrong?" he demanded. The girl hesitated, reluctant to speak, then forced the words out. "Since this morning, the cooks and kitchen maids have vanished." Before she could finish, Hong Yeonsan-gun flung the door open and stormed out in his stocking feet, his hat askew. That was the least of his concerns. "Vanished? What do you mean, vanished?" "It's as I said, my lord," she stammered. "Speak plainly. Did they sink into the earth or what?" The girl, on the verge of tears, continued, "I went to check the kitchen fire this morning, but there was no sign of anyone. When I looked in the servants' quarters, the cooks and maids had packed their things and fled. It seems they slipped away at dawn." Hong Yeonsan-gun's brow furrowed deeply. The guests arriving today were none other than the infamous father and son, whose influence was said to make even birds fall from the sky. The father, Sahong, was a seasoned power broker who had held key positions since the previous king's reign. His son, Sung-jae, was married to Princess Wysuk, the king's half-sister, making him practically royalty, the king's brother-in-law, no less. Sung-jae was also known to be a childhood friend of the notoriously volatile king. The number of households ruined by their schemes was no small tally. Their particular obsession was the art of hospitality, especially the meals served to guests. No matter how meticulously prepared the table, they always found fault. Once they seized on a flaw, one either paid a hefty bribe to appease them or faced demotion, interrogation, or worse. The cooks and maids must have fled in terror at the thought of serving such ruthless men. Hong Yeonsan-gun's face darkened with a scowl. The servant girl ventured cautiously, "What should we do, my lord?" After a moment of thought, a spark of an idea lit his eyes. He called out, "Deokshul." "Where's Deokshul?" "Here, my lord." Deokshul, the head servant, hurried over. "What were the charges against the prisoners brought in the other day?" Yeonsan-gun asked, pointing toward the far end of the compound. "The other day, my lord?" Deokshul hesitated, then realized. "Oh, you mean those scoundrels caught at Bacon Valley in Pocheon? Were they running a food stall?" "Aye, what else would they sell out there? Moonshine, meat, the lot. And get this, their food was a scam. They passed off dog meat as black goat, claiming it was good for your health. The old trick of Yangdu-goyuk, selling dog meat as pricier goat, a swindle dating back to the spring and autumn period. The meat, once boiled, was hard to distinguish, allowing them to charge exorbitant prices. But Hong Yeonsan-gun seemed to latch onto something else in Deokshul's words. "Go to the duty officer and quietly order those prisoners released from the cells," he instructed. "Pardon, my lord?" Deokshul blinked, confused. "Remove their shackles and send them to the kitchen. I'll handle the rest." "But, what are you planning, my lord?" "Move, now. There's no time." "But, my lord, releasing prisoners without due process violates the law. If the governor hears of this, it'll be more than a reprimand." Hong Yeonsan-gun's eyes flashed with impatience. "You fool! The Anhltl will be here any moment. Do you expect me to sit idly by? Do you want to see this entire office thrown into chaos? Move." "Why yes, my lord." Cowed by Yeonsan-gun's ferocity, Deokshul scrambled toward the cells. The morning buzzed with a restless energy. Jeong, unaccustomed to sleeping on a straw pile, had barely closed her eyes all night. She slowly sat up, wincing as a sharp crack sounded from her lower back, pain shooting through her. "Ugh!" The hulking man beside her, sprawled out with his legs splayed, was hogging most of the space, likely a cattle thief, she guessed. "Excuse me, sir, could you move over a bit? It's cramped enough as it is, and you're taking up all the room." Her cautious request was met with a snarl. "What's this nonsense? Starting the morning with bad luck, eh? What did you say?" Jaeyoung's temper flared. Her mind was already a storm of confusion, and now this man was picking a fight? "Listen, mister, just because I'm staying quiet doesn't mean I'm a pushover. You think I don't have a temper? I'm about to lose it. You little wretch, looking to get yourself killed?" The burly man raised his shackled hand threateningly, but Jaeyoung didn't flinch. "Oh, what, you're going to hit me? A criminal adding to his crimes? Shall I call the guards?" she shot back. His face flushed red, contorting with rage, but before he could retort, another voice piped up from the corner. "Agu, sorry about that. My brother's got a lot of pent-up anger. Let's all get along, eh?" A small, wiry man with a rat-like mustache, barely visible behind the larger figure, stepped forward with a placating grin. "Pardon the late introduction, I'm Bang Sundal, a wanderer of the 8 provinces. But, miss, you said something a bit harsh just now. Caught for crimes, you say? We've done no wrong. Just a little misunderstanding in our business dealings, that's all." "Oh, sure, whatever you say." Jaeyoung couldn't help but think how swindlers, whether centuries ago or in her own time, always seemed to share the same tired playbook. She was about to brush it off when the man who introduced himself as Bang Sundal fixed her with a curious gaze. "I heard you appeared out of nowhere by the river near Mapo Port. Is that true? They're calling you a ghost woman." It seemed the rumors had already reached this quick-witted man's ears. "And?" Jaeyoung replied, her tone guarded. "If it's true, you must have some remarkable talent, no? I once heard a strange tale myself." Before Bang Sundal could finish, the sound of guards rushing toward the cell interrupted him. "Move it, now! Get out here!" With a clank of locks, the cell doors swung open. Guards in black jackets began dragging the prisoners out. "What's going on? Where are you taking us? At least explain." The rough handling didn't bode well, and the prisoners, gripped by fear, resisted. But the guards, wielding batons, beat them into submission, hauling them out without mercy. Soon, Jaeyoung was left alone in the cell, catching the eye of the head jailer. "What's this? Is she one of them?" "No, I'm not." Jaeyoung began to protest, but a sly voice cut her off. "Oh, absolutely. It was Bang Sundal. This woman," he continued with a grin, "she's our leader, you see. The real brains of the operation." "What?" Jaeyoung's eyes widened in disbelief. "You're coming with us, boss," Bang Sundal said with a wink. Before she could argue, the jailer's rough hand seized her arm, yanking her out. The prisoners, now bound together like dried fish on a string, were dragged off to some unknown destination. Jaeyoung, incredulous, hissed at Bang Sundal as they were pulled along. "What the hell are you doing?" "Well, let's just say, sticking close to you feels like the safest bet." "Call it a gut feeling," he replied, his face infuriatingly calm. His ability to stay composed in a crisis was, if nothing else, impressive. God, what a shameless. Jaeyoung could only shake her head in exasperation. The prisoners were soon shoved into another place. As Jaeyoung stumbled in, a scene both foreign and familiar unfolded before her. A hearth with flames licking out from the firebox, several cauldrons hanging above it, and rows of white porcelain and bronze dishes lined up on shelves. This is a real Joseon-era kitchen. How often had she longed to see such a sight while studying ancient cookbooks? And now, here it was, vivid and tangible before her eyes. Lost in a brief moment of awe, she was jolted back by a pointed cough. Ahem. She turned to see Hong Eon-guk, the official who had brought her to the Gyeonggi governor's office yesterday, standing there. Forgive the abruptness of bringing you here, he said. But if you complete this task, I promise to grant you all a special pardon, in recognition of your efforts. A murmur rippled through the prisoners. Pardon. The word alone was enough to make their ears perk up. But a pardon was no simple matter. What kind of task could warrant such a reward? Bang Sundal was the first to speak, his eyes narrowing. What exactly do you want us to do? The prisoner's wary gazes fixed on Hong Eon-guk. His next words were utterly unexpected. From now on, you will prepare a meal. Chapter 4. Entertaining Guests, 2. Over there, could you please close the lid on that pot? Oh, come on, can't you see I've got my own work to do? Bring me a few small bowls over here. But these don't look like small bowls, they seem more like larger dishes. Then are these ones serving bowls? Right now, the kitchen of the Gyeonggi provincial office was utter chaos, pandemonium incarnate. The prisoners gathered inside were milling about in confusion, chattering aimlessly as they bumped into each other left and right. Clang, crash. In the midst of it all, as if things weren't bad enough, someone had apparently dropped a dish. They claimed to have come selling illicit liquor and food, but in essence, they were fraudsters who'd been peddling dog meat as something else. There was no way they could properly cook in a real kitchen. Wait, just a moment. The one who let out a sharp yell amid the massive disorder unfolding in the kitchen was Ji Yang. At this rate, they wouldn't be able to accomplish anything. In a kitchen, if one person didn't take charge and direct the whole operation, you couldn't even fry an egg. Hadn't she experienced that countless times over the years while cooking in restaurants? I know a bit about preparing food. Back home, I was a head cook. At Ji Yang's single utterance, the chaotic kitchen fell silent in an instant. Soon, one of the prisoners asked back with a face full of disbelief. What's that supposed to mean? Your accent sounds strange, I don't know where you're from, but in your hometown, do women work as head cooks? Probably just stirred up some noodle soup at a roadside tavern. In this era, being a head cook was a job reserved solely for men. Snide laughter erupted here and there, but Ji Yang bit her tongue and raised her voice clearly and steadily. Whether you believe me or not is up to you, but if you follow my instructions, we can finish preparing the food. Then everyone can receive a pardon. Otherwise, we can all just go back to that shed or prison, whatever it was. At those words, the burly man who'd been arguing with Ji Yang since they were in the cell glared and approached her. Oh, so we're supposed to listen to the likes of you now? I don't know where you rolled in from, you wench, but even after getting a beating, that mouth of yours sure runs well. Just as the burly man growled threats and raised his hand to strike her. Is that true? The one who suddenly interjected was Bang Sundal, the leader of the fraudster gang. Are you willing to take responsibility for what you just said? As Bang Sundal cut in with a serious expression, the prisoners who'd been chattering noisily all shut their mouths. Ji Yang nodded boldly. If you just follow my lead, we can wrap up a banquet table like this in no time. But promise me this, no matter what, you'll obey my instructions. Bang Sundal gazed steadily into Ji Yang's eyes, then abruptly tossed out to the people gathered in the kitchen. What are you all doing? Didn't you hear? If we follow this woman's words, we can survive. For some unknown reason, the prisoners seemed to hold a peculiar trust in this small-statured Bang Sundal. With just his one remark, an atmosphere of gradual acceptance began to form among the prisoners. Well, following Sundal's lead has never done us wrong before. Anyway, we're dead either way at this point. Might as well trust her once. The prisoners rolled up their sleeves and looked toward Ji Yang's face. Confirming that sight, Bong Xiandao curled his lips, framed by his mouse-like mustache, into a grin. I've laid out the mat for you, so go ahead and give it your best shot without worry. Seeing how he turned the prisoners' minds in an instant, he clearly wasn't just some boastful charlatan. Now, all that remained was to properly demonstrate her skills. Ji Young closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The situation seemed to be unfolding a bit strangely, but this was a golden opportunity to personally try making Joseon-era dishes that she'd only encountered in ancient cookbooks until now. Moreover, to escape from here, there was no other choice. You over there, sir, keep an eye on the cauldron. You two here, please trim the vegetables. And the big guy, slice the meat. As Ji Yang assigned roles, the kitchen soon began to bustle with activity. What are your intentions, sir? Entrusting such an important meal preparation to these rootless nobodies who rolled in from who knows where. Shouldn't we mobilize our own government slaves even now? Deokshul, who had sidled up close to Hong Yeon-guk, wore a face etched with unrelenting worry. However, Hong Yeon-guk slowly shook his head. The government slaves are, after all, affiliated with the provincial office. If we mobilize them, the responsibility will fall squarely on the officials of the office, won't it? That may be so, but those people are different. They're a band of fraudsters wandering the 8 provinces, with no connection to us whatsoever. Then. Even if the father and son find fault with the food, we can just shift the blame to them. In the worst case, we drag them out and punish them in front of the father and son, then, no matter how harsh those bastards are, they won't be able to pursue it further. Deokshul looked at Hong Yeon-guk's face with a shocked expression. Hong Yeon-guk had already anticipated that the guest reception would fail. He was merely trying to divert the responsibility away from themselves and onto the prisoners. Yes, sir. Say no more. Deokshul could no longer open his mouth in the face of that desperate stratagem born of bitter necessity to protect his family, accepting sacrifice as the price. The kitchen of the Gyeonggi provincial office. Preparations for the banquet table to be served at the guest reception were in full swing. Oh man, why won't the knife cut into this damn meat? The burly man grumbled incessantly as he sliced the meat. I've never seen meat like this in all my life. Is this lean meat or whale tendon or what? Let me check it for you. Ji Yang quickly inspected the state of the meat. The tough texture of the dark red flesh, almost devoid of fat. Not a trace of white marbling was visible. It looks like they've slaughtered an ox used for farm work. Well, in this era, dreaming of Hanwoo beef raised on grain feed would be impossible. It wasn't unreasonable to think so. The marbled, fat-rich 1++ grade Hanwoo that modern people favor depends on the breeding method. The key is feeding them a high-carbohydrate grain diet to their fill while severely restricting movement to minimize muscle and maximize fat in the meat. But that's a breeding technique only possible in the modern era, where grain production overflows. In this time, when even people go hungry during the barley hump and peasants starve to death, there's no way they'd have grain feed to spare for cattle. Moreover, there's no chance that such a luxurious breeding method, fattening up valuable oxen without making them work, just for the sake of it, would have been developed in this era. So, most beef would come from slaughtering old oxen that had been fed grass, worked in the fields, and could labor no more. But even so, something feels off about this. Even accounting for the era's limitations, it shouldn't be impossible to procure better meat than this. With important guests arriving, they could at least have slaughtered a young heifer, yet what was in the kitchen now was meat from an old bull. Could it be that the previous kitchen staff had deliberately left behind such ingredients? Their sudden disappearance from this morning, along with the half-hearted preparation of materials. There were more than a few suspicious points. As her thoughts reached that far, Ji Yang began meticulously examining the other ingredients as well. First, she chewed and tasted the greens that had been sliced in front of her. They're quite different from the ingredients I used in the modern world. Since variety improvements haven't happened yet, the vegetables are overall smaller, tougher in texture, and less sweet. These were vegetables grown in the office's attached garden plot and pulled fresh that morning, so their condition wasn't particularly bad. It was just that they were far removed from the modern ingredients Ji Yang had handled. And no wonder, the vegetables we commonly encounter are the result of centuries of selective breeding, transformed into far more marketable forms than their native varieties. But the inherent aromas in these vegetables are much richer here, aren't they? Thanks to an environment free of chemical fertilizers or herbicides, these vegetables had grown almost like wild plants amid the weeds. They might be tougher, more bitter, and smaller, but their flavors were undeniably stronger than those of modern produce. The real problem lay elsewhere. It was only now that she realized most of the vegetables she was accustomed to using in her everyday cooking didn't even exist in this era. Not just tomatoes, potatoes, sweet potatoes, or corn, but even carrots, onions, peppers, and pumpkins, most ingredients familiar to us only entered this land in the late Joseon period or during the Korean Empire. Even cabbage was different from what we know in this time. It wasn't the tightly wrapped head cabbage, but a native variety with leaves spreading wide and flat, so even kimchi couldn't help but differ from the form we're familiar with. On top of that, another issue was the absence of refrigerators in this era. Beyond freshly picked vegetables from the fields, basic ingredients were mostly dried radish greens or pickled vegetables preserved in soybean paste or soy sauce. But the soybean paste and soy sauce here are all made through natural fermentation, so in that regard, they might have even better flavor than the mediocre modern versions. The soy products commonly available in the modern world are mass-produced using artificially cultured microbes necessary for fermentation. It's quick and safe for large-scale production, but it can't replicate the complex flavors that come from natural fermentation. Even today, traditionally made, naturally fermented soy products sell for higher prices than factory ones because of the unique flavors created by the involvement of numerous microorganisms in the process. From that perspective, the ingredients here were essentially rare, authentic native fermented foods made in the true traditional way, something hard to find in the modern world. Ji Yang dipped her finger into the soybean paste and soy sauce brought from the jars and tasted them. The soy products of this era prioritize preservation, so the saltiness is a bit strong, but they definitely have that deep fermented flavor. The soy sauce crammed into the jars wasn't just one type. From the clear, light soy sauce skimmed from the top, to medium soy, and thick, dark soy divided variously by consistency. Because sauces weren't diverse, soy sauce was instead stocked in multiple versions. If she diluted and combined them appropriately depending on the dish, it seemed there'd be no shortage for flavoring. So, the immediate problem was just this tough beef. How should she cook this meat? In this era, without ovens or gas ranges. All that was visible were the stove, hearth, and cauldrons. How could she make it tender? At that moment, a chill suddenly ran through Ji Yang's entire body. This situation, it's exactly like the one described in that book, manhwa. A method for cooking tough meat to make it tender was recorded in the ancient cookbook manhwa. If she followed that method, she might be able to overcome this predicament. By any chance, if there's hanji, paper, could you bring me just one sheet? When she asked the government slave girl who was helping with errands in the kitchen, the girl soon returned with a sheet of hanji that bore traces of brush calligraphy practice. In this era, paper wasn't the cheap commodity it is now, so scavenging used paper was the best she could do. But this would suffice. Ji Yang spread out the hanji wide, then dipped a brush in sesame oil and began coating the paper with it. Since it's come to this, I'll just give it a try. It was a cooking method she'd never attempted before, but there was no other option anyway. Before she knew it, Ji Yang's eyes were sparkling with a fervent gleam. Chapter 5. Sous Vide 1. Come here. A booming voice echoed from beyond the main gate. As the gate swung open, the Im family's retainers stood outside, puffing out their chests as if they themselves were high-ranking officials. Behind them, Two men clad in vibrant silk robes appeared, Sahong and his son, Sung-jae. What are you all dawdling for? The Lord has arrived, move quickly. We've been expecting you. Please, come inside. Deokshul, the government slave of the Gyeonggi provincial office, greeted the I'm father and son with an ingratiating manner, ushering them inside. As they stepped into the guest quarters, Hong Yeon-guk, dressed in formal attire, was already there to receive them. You've arrived. Hong Yeon-guk, humble clerk of the Gyeonggi provincial office, pays his respects to the Minister of Public Works and the Chief State Councillor. While Hong Yeon-guk bowed deeply, his forehead nearly touching the ground, Sahong and Sung-jae stood with hands clasped behind their backs, accepting the bow with haughty airs. How is your father's health? Thanks to your Excellency's concern, he is always in good spirits. Please, this way. They were led to a pavilion in the garden attached to the provincial office, where Joseon courtesans were already plucking the soft strings of a gyeogeum, creating an elegant atmosphere. Waiting there was an elderly man with graying hair, who rose and greeted them respectfully. It was Hong Yeon-guk's father, Hong Gwi-dal, the Gyeonggi provincial governor responsible for the region's administration. You've gone to great trouble coming all this way, esteemed guests from the court. Please, take a seat. Trouble? It's hardly an hour's journey, calling it trouble might offend those lords sent off to distant exile, Sung-jae quipped with a boisterous laugh, his jest bordering on rudeness. Despite the young Sung-jae's flippant remark to a second-rank provincial governor, Hong Gwi-dal could only let out a hearty chuckle to brush it off. Ha ha ha, the chief state councillor's wit remains as sharp as ever. Please, sit. You there, what are you doing? Bring out the table at once. Yes, my lord. Soon, female slaves brought out a light refreshment table to serve before the main meal. In no time, Hong Gwi-dal and Hong Yeon-guk sat across from Sahong and Sung-jae in the pavilion, facing each other. By the way, His Majesty is quite concerned. It's been some time since the royal decree to cordon off the 10-li radius outside the capital's walls to create a hunting ground and bar commoners' entry. Yet, on our way here, we saw people who still haven't left. At Sahong's words, Hong Gwi-dal's white eyebrows twitched. Tearing down the homes of commoners and driving them out just to make a hunting ground on the king's whim, could such an order even be justified? With a capricious king, delaying and dragging things out might lead him to change his mind. There was no need to rush. That had been Hong Gwi-dal's reasoning for putting off the task. The lowly commoners, scraping by day to day, likely haven't received the order clearly. They have their livelihoods to consider, so they'll leave in their own time. I humbly ask your Excellency to convey this well to His Majesty. Humph, it almost sounds like the governor is taking His Majesty's orders lightly. How could I dare? I beg your Excellency to retract such words. Though his tone remained courteous, Hong Gwi-dal couldn't hide the flush rising to his face. These men are cunningly trying to frame me for defying royal orders. He was suppressing his displeasure and responding as diplomatically as possible when Sung-jae, sitting opposite with narrowed eyes, took up the conversation with a piercing gaze. There's a rumor circulating in the capital that the governor might harbor disloyal thoughts toward His Majesty. Of course, we know you'd never do such a thing, but can we control how the world misinterprets? As Sung-jae finished with a cryptic smile, a chill ran down Hong Yeon-guk's spine. What do you mean by that? To avoid such misunderstandings, don't you think some proof is necessary? They say there's nothing better than a person to prove one's loyalty. A person. I heard you have a young daughter. Hong Yeon-guk's face turned as pale as paper. This was exactly what he had feared most. His daughter becoming a target for Chaihong. Chaihong, the selection of women to be offered to the king. And the one in charge of this task, the Chaihong SA, envoy for selecting women, was none other than Sung-jae. The targets of Chaihong ranged from noble ladies to courtesans, regardless of status. Those chosen to enter the palace to entertain the king with music and festivities were called hyungcheong. The phrase hyungcheong mangcheong, reckless debauchery, originated from this very practice. Rumor had it that once a woman was selected for the palace, she could never leave again, doomed to become a plaything for a brutal king. What father would want to consign his daughter to such a cruel fate? Whether aware of Han Eon-guk's anguish or not, Sun Jae continued to wield his serpent-like tongue. If the daughter of Lord Hong serves His Majesty, how could anyone in the realm doubt your loyalty? Isn't that so? Please, I beg you to retract such words. She's still a child, barely weaned from her mother's milk. Han Eon-guk spoke politely, but his heart was burning inside. I need to stay sharp from now on. Hey, is this really going to work? Bong Seon-dal, with an anxious look, kept peering into the cauldron. I heard the guests coming today are that notorious father and son from the capital. If this isn't done properly, we might really be in for it. Do you even know who those people are? Half listening to Bong Seon-dal's fussing, Ji Yang was fully focused, her hand submerged in the cauldron's water. Are you listening to me? I'm listening, so please pour in one more ladle of water. Grumbling, Bong Seon-dal did as Ji Yang instructed, scooping water with a ladle and pouring it into the cauldron. Is this enough? Yes, it's almost done. With her sleeves rolled up and her hand in the hot water, beads of sweat glistened on Ji Yang's forehead. The secret cooking method Ji Yang was attempting. When she realized they had no choice but to use the tough old bull's meat, this was the first method that came to her mind. A technique known in the modern world as sous vide. Sous vide, French for under vacuum, refers to a method of cooking ingredients at a low temperature in a vacuum-sealed environment. The ingredients are placed in a plastic bag, sealed with the air removed, and cooked in water at around 55 degrees Celsius for an extended period. But why in the world are we cooking the meat in such a bizarre way? At least explain what we're doing. Bong Seon-dal, unable to hold back, threw out the question brusquely. Well, it's kind of complicated, but it's to make the meat tender. Lacking confidence to explain the principle to someone from the Joseon era in a way they'd understand, Ji Yang trailed off vaguely. Cooking meat means altering its proteins at specific temperatures. Meat proteins primarily consist of actin and myosin. Around 50 degrees, myosin begins to react, making the meat tender. But if the temperature exceeds 65 degrees, the remaining protein, actin, coagulates, causing the meat to toughen again. Theoretically, heating at the intermediate temperature around 55 degrees would cook the meat to its most tender state. However, with tools like direct flame or frying pans, maintaining such precise temperatures is impossible. There's only one way to heat meat accurately. Using water to transfer heat. If you place the meat in water maintained at a consistent temperature and give it enough time, the meat will cook exactly to that water's temperature. This is the core principle of sous vide cooking. The best way to tenderize the poor quality ingredients at hand. If she could cook sous vide at exactly 55 degrees, even tough bull meat could be transformed into something tender. But that method was, for now, only theoretically possible. There's nothing here, no heating device, no plastic bags for vacuum sealing, not even a thermometer. Yet, there was a way. What came to Ji Yang's mind was a technique from manganrock. Wrapping the ingredients in hanji paper. Oil-coated hanji wrapped in layers can substitute for a plastic bag. This way, the hanji clings tightly to the ingredients, creating a vacuum effect, while the oil prevents the paper from absorbing moisture and tearing. In other words, oil-coated paper could serve as a substitute for vacuum-sealed plastic bags. That's why she'd asked the slave girl for hanji and coated it with sesame oil earlier. But even if I've solved the plastic bag issue, there's still a major challenge. The most critical element of sous vide is maintaining a consistent water temperature. Without a sous vide machine or even a thermometer, how could she keep the water at 55 degrees? Yet, Ji Yang had a plan for this too. There are temperatures you can know without a thermometer, the boiling point of water at 100 degrees and, though less precise, the room temperature of water at around 20 degrees. Creating water at 100 degrees and 20 degrees wasn't too difficult. And another thing she knew, when waters of different temperatures are mixed, they reach an equilibrium at an intermediate temperature. So-called thermal equilibrium. In theory, mixing boiling water at 100 degrees with water at 20 degrees would result in an equilibrium around 60 degrees. This assumes equal volumes of water. By adjusting the amounts, adding a bit more cold water, she could achieve a lower equilibrium, closer to 55 degrees. This way, I can at least get water close to 55 degrees. But setting the water temperature once isn't the end. The most critical part of sous vide is maintaining that temperature without letting it rise or fall for a long time. From there, she had to rely on one thing alone. This was no longer science but the realm of instinct. I have to trust my memory of 55-degree water, honed through countless sous vide experiences. A temperature that's warm but not scalding hot. She had no choice but to keep checking it with her fingertips, relying on her memory of that temperature. I don't fully understand what you're saying, but since we've decided to trust you, we'll see it through to the end. Muttering, Bong Xiandao faithfully assisted Ji Yang. Having started the sous vide process since morning, it had already been over 3 hours. As Ji Yang checked the water temperature every 5 minutes, a servant girl came rushing in, flustered. The Lord says to prepare the dining trays now. All right. Tell him we'll bring them soon. It was finally time to check the results of the long sous vide process. Ji Yang carefully lifted the bundle from the lukewarm water and unwrapped the oil-coated hanji. What slowly emerged was a piece of meat cooked to a deep brown. As she sliced it with a sharp knife, the cross-section revealed a tender, pink interior, glistening beautifully. Phew! It's a success. The color alone told Ji Yang instinctively. The sous vide cooking had been completed successfully. A faint smile spread across her face, but it was too early to relax. The dish wasn't finished yet. Her eyes sparkled once more. Now the real work begins. Chapter 6. Sous vide 2. We present the dining trays. With the voices of the servant women, for small dining trays were placed before the 4 men seated in the pavilion: Hong Gwi-dal and his son Hong Yeon-guk, and Im Sa-hong and his son Im Sung-jae. Each tray held only a few bronze vessels. At the center was a thickly sliced beef dish, accompanied by a few pieces of pickled vegetables, a bowl of rice, and a side of dried radish greens in soybean paste soup. That was all. What a sparse spread. It's as if a famine struck only this region's storehouses, Im Sung-jae remarked, a peculiarly smug smile flickering across his face as he spoke with a mocking tone. Perhaps his expectations had been met. The previous day, he had sent men to bribe and intimidate the provincial office's cooks and kitchen maids, driving them away. It seemed his scheme had borne fruit. Whether aware of this or not, Hong Yeon-guk responded with an unruffled air. Knowing Your Excellency enjoys rare delicacies, we deliberately instructed the preparation of a novel dish. I hope it suits your taste. With all the cooks and kitchen staff gone, what kind of meal could they possibly have prepared for this guest reception? A spark of curiosity lit in Im Sung-jae. He picked up a bronze spoon and began prodding the food on the tray, only to suddenly click his tongue. TCH, TCH, TCH. What is this dish supposed to be? I never knew Clerk Hong had a taste for barbarian cuisine. What do you mean by that, Your Excellency? I'm afraid this spread is unacceptable. Im Sung-jae slammed his spoon down with a clang, and the bronze vessels on the tray reverberated with a lingering, bell-like echo. With an oily eloquence, he continued. It is said that a ruler's table should reflect the natural bounty and customs of the surrounding 10 li. Thus, a guest from another region can gauge the local traditions, geography, and agricultural prosperity just by looking at the spread. That is true. Yet all I see on this tray is grilled meat. What is this if not the custom of meat-craving barbarians? How can one who indulges in such fare call himself a scholar official devoted to the nation? At Sungjae's words, Im Sahon, the Minister of Public Works, stroked his beard and shook his head in disappointment. There's truth in what you say. How could Lord Hong make such a blunder? Could it be his heart lies elsewhere? For the Im father and son, intent on finding fault with the reception, this meager tray was the perfect pretext. Wasn't that precisely why they had come in the first place? This was expected. Having anticipated this outcome, Hong Yeon-guk sensed the moment had come to set his morning's plan into motion. He stepped forward, bowing deeply before the Im father and son. In our zeal to please your excellencies, we have overreached and committed a grave discourtesy. We are well aware this is no trifling matter. Indeed, it is not. Then it is only fitting that we set a proper example for the realm. Set a proper example. Im Sungjae's eyes wavered, caught off guard by Hong Yeon-guk's excessive deference. Indeed. To that end, I will personally bring forth the cook responsible for this meal and punish them myself to appease your anger. Wait, Clerk Hong, what are you saying? You there? Is no one present? Bring the cook and kitchen staff from the kitchen at once. That's not what we meant. Is this not the way to atone for the offense committed against your excellencies? The Im father and son began to show signs of unease at Hong Yeon-guk's sudden assertiveness. Did the trays really go up properly? In the kitchen, Bong Si-dal and the prisoners craned their necks toward the garden, their hearts pounding with anxiety. They couldn't see anything from their position, but their curiosity was too great to bear. It feels like the spread was a bit too sparse, Bong Si-dal muttered, his voice tinged with worry. Ji Yang quietly shook her head. Too many dishes can distract from the flavor of the food itself. If they taste what we've prepared, I'm confident we'll come out on top. The beef, tenderly cooked sous vide, would offer a texture unlike anything people of this era had ever experienced. And Ji Yang had another ace up her sleeve, a special sauce served alongside it. That sauce contained a flavor these people had never tasted before, a taste so captivating that any gourmet would be powerless to resist. Or so she believed. Just then, a group of guards burst into the kitchen. What are you doing? Why are you doing this? No questions. Come with us. Without explanation, Ji Yang, Bong Si-dal, and the other prisoners were roughly seized by the scruff of their necks and dragged outside. They were brought to the pavilion in the garden, where the banquet was supposed to be underway. What are you standing around for? Administer the rod to these wretches who have insulted the decorum of scholar officials. Hong Yeon-guk's furious voice cut through the air like a blade. In that fleeting moment, Ji Yang sensed something was terribly wrong. The trays they had painstakingly prepared hadn't even been touched. Wait, please. Ji Yang tried to speak urgently, but the guards gave her no chance, forcing her and the prisoners to kneel in the garden courtyard. From a distance, two sturdy executioners approached, one arm freed from their sleeves, each carrying a massive rod as large as their torsos. These were the Kdrama rods used to punish serious offenders. Measuring 5 feet 7 inches, they were the largest of the 5 types of rods in the provincial office. A few strikes might seem trivial, but the Kdrama could easily leave a person crippled or even dead from the impact, a punishment so severe it was notorious. Oh no, oh no. Please, my lord, we've done wrong. At the sight of the Kdrama, Bong Si-dal and the prisoners' faces turned ashen, and they prostrated themselves, begging desperately. Hey, sir, no, my lord. Why are you doing this? Meeting Ji Yang's pleading gaze, Hong Yeon-guk turned his head, deliberately avoiding her eyes. Though it was a desperate measure to protect his family, sacrificing innocent people was no less reprehensible. But the thought of his young daughter becoming a target for Chaihong forced him to harden his heart. The food of scholar officials must utilize the region's natural bounty in its entirety, leaving nothing to waste. Yet this spread consists of mere meat. How can it be called proper? For insulting the decorum of this guest reception, they will be severely punished. No, that's not true. Even in that moment, Ji Yang seized the opportunity and shouted back. Held fast by the guards, unable to move a finger, the only thing she could do was raise her voice. That spread contains all the bounty of this land. Shikbeep Jeon, food embodies nature. It was a concept from Manganrock, one Ji Young, who had studied ancient cookbooks, knew well. Her methods simply transcended the limitations of this era. What did you just say? This contains the bounty of this land? Yes, it does. Hong Yeon-guk, visibly startled, questioned her, and Ji Yang answered with confidence. Then, a sharp voice cut through from behind. Well, that's intriguing. The voice belonged to Sa-hong, the father of the Im duo, who had been observing the unfolding scene. Perhaps Ji Yang's words had piqued the curiosity of this reputed gourmet. Explain how that's so. You only know the taste of food once you eat it, don't you? I'll explain afterward. Kneeling on the ground, Ji Yang's voice was resolute, though her heart was pounding like a hammer. To avoid death by the Kdrama in the executioner's hands, she had to get them to try the food first. How bold! Very well. But if your explanation isn't convincing, this won't be overlooked. With that, Sa-hong picked up a piece of beef with his bronze chopsticks. The glossy, dark brown sauce coated a vibrantly pink piece of meat. A man who had tasted every delicacy across the land, Sa-hong, a powerful figure second to none in the capital, popped the entire piece into his mouth and began to chew. All eyes in the pavilion converged on his mouth. At that moment, Sa-hong's eyes widened, his pupils contracting. Oh! A faint exclamation, almost a moan, escaped his lips, and his eyebrows trembled subtly. Then, as if in a trance, his eyes began to close dreamily. No way! Watching from the side, Sung-jae sensed something extraordinary and hurriedly brought a piece of the meat to his own mouth. After a few chews, shock spread across his face as well. This is impossible. This taste. Both men were overwhelmed, lost for words in the face of a storm of flavors. The most astonished were Hong Gwi-dal and Hong Yeon-guk. A spread they had considered a throwaway had turned the tables? Unable to believe it themselves, they quickly brought pieces of the meat to their mouths. Soon, their expressions shifted, betraying their shock. What in the world is this? It's beef cooked with a special method over a long time. It may look like just meat, but in truth, it contains every ingredient this land has to offer. Every ingredient? Yes. The sauce coating the meat isn't simply soy sauce. We extracted juice from vegetables grown in the local garden, then simmered it with anchovies and kelp from Mapo to make a broth. To that, we added shiitake mushrooms gathered from the hills behind the provincial office, reducing it with soy sauce to create a rich sauce. What Ji Yang had achieved was an explosion of umami. The key was the mushrooms, anchovies, and kelp. Guanylic acid from shiitake mushrooms, inosinic acid from anchovies, and glutamic acid from kelp. When these three distinct umami components are combined in specific proportions, the flavor amplifies exponentially, creating what could be called an umami bomb. This combination is even used in modern chemical seasonings like MSG. For people of this era, accustomed only to the umami of simple meat broths, this level of flavor was utterly unprecedented. Moreover, using the rich aroma of the garden's vegetables as the base added a profound depth to the sauce. Paired with the tenderly cooked sous vide beef, it was no wonder the people of this era were left wide-eyed. This is truly a taste of the heavens. Savoring the dish, Im Sahong, having cleared his tray, let out another exclamation of awe. The others seated in the pavilion were no different. The power struggle over the trays was forgotten as they lost themselves entirely in the flavors of the food. Phew! Watching them, Ji Yang let out a quiet sigh of relief. It seemed they had avoided the worst outcome. This was truly unexpected. To taste such a delicacy in a place like this. Even with medicinal liquor and candied ginger served as palate cleansers, the Im father and son couldn't stop talking about the food they'd just eaten. I thought it was mere grilled meat, but it held such complex, subtle flavors. Your claim that it distilled the essence of this land's ingredients was no exaggeration. I felt the same as my father. With a subtle glance, Im Sahong addressed Hong Yeon-guk. Be honest. That threat to punish the cook earlier, was it all a staged act? You saw through that, did you? It seems I can't fool your excellency's eyes, huh? Hong Yeon-guk laughed heartily, brushing off the question. But inwardly, he wasn't entirely at ease. He had nearly subjected innocent people to a brutal beating, and no matter how desperate his situation, such a base scheme could hardly be called honorable. Moreover, the Im father and son's sudden magnanimity after a single dish felt vaguely unsettling. They weren't the type to express their emotions so openly without some ulterior motive. To think that such thoughtful men as Lord Hong and his son would harbor disloyal thoughts toward His Majesty is utterly absurd. The rumors of the world are indeed fearsome. We're grateful for your understanding. That being said. Sipping his liquor, Im Sung-jae glanced cautiously at his father. At Im Sahong's nod, Sung-jae reached into his robe and placed something on the floor with a thud. It was the red Chaihong plaque, symbolizing the authority of the envoy for selecting women. Could this plaque mean? As a foreboding thought flashed through Hong Yeon-guk's mind, Im Sung-jae's eyes glinted strangely. We have found a Chaihong to offer His Majesty. Chapter 7. Entering the Palace. A narrow path lined with dense foliage. A deer, graceful in its form, darts through the underbrush. Yet, from its body, red blood drips steadily, arrows lodged deep in its flesh from multiple angles. Perhaps it had lost too much blood. Soon, the deer's steps visibly slow. Panting, exhaling hot breaths, it comes to a halt. Whoosh! An arrow, launched from somewhere, pierces the deer's neck with deadly precision. The deer collapses on the spot, its body trembling violently. A perfect shot. A glossy white horse approaches the fallen deer at a leisurely pace. The man astride it is neither dressed as a hunter nor a military officer. Peeking out between leather arm guards and a quiver is a crimson ganryampo, the royal dragon robe. Tall and slender, with a complexion so pale it borders on sickly, his sharp nose and long eyelashes give him a beauty that could almost be described as feminine despite his maleness. But what stands out most on his face are his eyes. Light brown pupils that hold both extreme innocence and cruelty, like those of a young boy gleefully tearing apart a live insect. This man, recorded as the worst tyrant in Joseon history, nay, in all of Korean history. The 10th king of Joseon, Yeonsangun Lee Yong. It has expired, Your Majesty. A man in black robes dismounts and checks the deer's pulse. Back when I was still in the Jamgyo, the prince's residence before ascending the throne, my father cherished these creatures like gold or jade. I found it utterly laughable. The king, dismounting, pulls the arrow lodged deep in the deer's neck. Blood, still pulsing from the dying animal, splatters, staining the white horse and the crimson robe with red splotches. Chief eunuch, these deer. A strange smile plays on the king's blood-smeared face. They're not meant to be raised. They're beasts that taste best when shot dead. At that moment, one of the royal guards, Jung-gun, trailing some 50 paces behind, rides up and whispers something into the king's ear. His face lights up with sudden delight. Enough! The hunt ends here for today. I shall return to the palace at once. The king shouts, leaping onto the white horse's back. Returning already, your majesty? Didn't you hear? Sung-jae has returned from the Chai-hong. He's brought a slew of new women. How could I possibly wait? And today's schedule. Finish the hunt, chief eunuch. We'll discuss the rest later. With that, the king lets out a shout, turns his horse toward the capital, and gallops off. The man called chief eunuch watches his retreating figure in silence. The palace maids scurry about with quick steps. If the bathwater's temperature is even slightly off, the entire inner court would be turned upside down that day. The water must be warmed to just the right temperature, infused with a touch of camellia oil, rice wine, and an assortment of precious herbs and flower petals. Lady Suk-young, please enter. Before the head palace lady's clear voice even fades, a woman strides confidently onto the raised wooden floor. Her steps are unlike those of any ordinary palace maid. Neither the refined gait of a noblewoman nor the cautious tread of a common wife. Her features, too, are extraordinary. An oval face, white as an egg, with narrow, almond-shaped eyes, a sharp nose, and vivid red lips. Taken individually, her features aren't particularly striking. Yet this woman, said to have been born with an innate allure, exudes an indescribable sensuality that seems to overflow from her very being. If the phrase Gyeonggukjasek, a beauty capable of toppling a nation, could be personified, it would be her. The one person capable of swaying the fearsome king Yeonsan-gun. Lady Suk-young, third-rank concubine, Jang Nok-soo. Reaching the bathing chamber, she unhesitatingly sheds her clothes without a trace of shame. As the maids approach to remove her hairpins, her silken hair cascades like a waterfall over her alabaster skin. Nok-soo slides slowly into the warm, petal-strewn bathwater, closing her eyes to savor its warmth. Sung-jae brought back Nuon Pyong, entertainers responsible for music and dance for Yeonsan-gun, didn't he? She murmurs softly, eyes still closed. The maid attending her hesitates before replying. It is said that nearly 100 Pyong were gathered from the 8 provinces this time. Before the maid finishes, Nok-soo lets out a derisive scoff. 8 or 9 out of 10 will likely be discarded without even being presented to His Majesty. Why bother dragging so many here? Where's Chu-woo? Yes, Lady Suk-young. A maid named Chu-woo steps forward, bowing quietly before the concubine. Her demeanor is colder and sharper than the other maids. Officially, she is a supervising palace lady tasked with maintaining discipline in the inner court, but in truth, she is Nok-soo's right hand. I heard Sung-jae and his father visited Governor Hong of Gyeonggi. That is so, my lady. Then they must have secured a Chai-hong as well? That is so, my lady. However, is there a problem? The Chai-hong they brought isn't the governor's daughter, but a woman who was cooking in the kitchen. What? Nok-soo's eyes snap open, glaring at Chu-woo. The maids around her shrink back in fear at her piercing gaze. I told them to bring the governor's daughter to tame that old thorn in my side, Hong, and they bring some kitchen wench? I haven't heard the full details, but it is said the Chai-hong envoy made the choice himself. Where are they now? They are to be taken to the royal kitchen after their preparations are complete. Nok-soo's smooth, white brow furrows at Chu-woo's words. That snake-im Sung-jae is up to something again. Abruptly, Nok-soo rises from the bath, fragrant water streaming down her body. The maids rush forward, scrambling to wrap her in silk cloth. We're going to the royal kitchen. Now. Her jade-like face twists with an eerie expression. Wait, hold on. Before Jiang can protest, the maids descend upon her, stripping her clothes. Her bare body is plunged into bathwater scented with camellia oil. As soon as the bath is done, she is draped in silk as thin as dragonfly wings. 2 or 3 maids then swarm her, combing her hair while chattering among themselves. They bring in all these common women out of nowhere, telling us to bathe and dress them. What kind of work is this? Who are you telling? Ugh. By the way, this girl's clothes were already strange, but her hair's odd too. Right? It barely reaches her shoulders and is all curly. And from the middle down, it's brown. How peculiar. That's because I haven't touched up my root dye in a while. Ji Yang can't bring herself to say it aloud as the maids continue their gossip. I heard she's from some barbarian land. Is that why her hair's like this? Now that you mention it, she does look a bit strange. They must not eat well there. She's so skinny. Hey! I can hear everything. Guess beauty standards are a bit different in this era. As she tries to console herself, the stern voice of an older palace lady, the chief overseer, rings out. Once the basic preparations are done, take the girls selected as unpion that way, and those for the royal kitchen this way. The royal kitchen? Before Ji Yang can process the meaning, she is swept along with a group of women, herded like sheep to some unknown destination. They arrive at a place called the Sojabang, the royal kitchen. Under the jurisdiction of the Songwon, the office managing all palace food supplies, the Sojabang is divided into the inner kitchen, outer kitchen, and confectionery. The inner kitchen, commonly called the Surigan, is where meals for the king are prepared daily. Dozens of people work tirelessly, slicing ingredients, stoking fires, simmering broths, like a battlefield of culinary creation. This is the epicenter of the era's finest ingredients and cooking facilities. To think I'd see this place with my own eyes. Standing in the space she had only imagined, Ji Yang momentarily forgets her predicament, gazing in awe at the spectacle before her. What are you staring at? Move! Snapped out of her reverie by the chief overseer's shout, Ji Yang hurries forward. A dozen women have gathered at one end of the Surigan. Candidates to become palace maids working in the royal kitchen, she'd heard. But, palace maids cooking, in the royal kitchen? Ji Yang tilts her head, puzzled. In this era, the Surigan is staffed exclusively by men, contrary to common assumptions. The cooks here are hereditary professionals, making it a place where outsiders rarely set foot. They say they're selecting maids to serve during His Majesty's meals, a sharp-looking woman beside her whispers, as if reading Ji Yang's confusion. They need to tend the brazier to keep the soup warm and handle the side dishes, so they have to know how to cook. I heard earlier that His Majesty severely punished a maid serving at his meal because he didn't like the food. Punished, severely? An anxious murmur ripples through the women. At that moment, Lady Suk-yong arrives. Shuol, the supervising palace lady, announces in a clear voice, and the room falls silent, as if doused with cold water. Everyone bows their heads. The distinctive sound of bold footsteps follows. Lady Jang Nok-soo has entered the Surigan without warning. Are these the ones? The new girls brought in? Striding in without hesitation, Nok-soo heads straight for the group of women. The older chief overseer bows deeply to the much younger concubine. My lady, what brings you to such a place in person? These are the girls who will handle His Majesty's food. I must see them with my own eyes. Nok-soo scans the women with a gaze laced with contempt. As her icy eyes pass over them, the women lower their gazes, fearful of catching her attention. The chief overseer tries to ease the tension. They were carefully chosen from noble families skilled in hosting receptions. They look the part. Just a bunch of plain faces. But there seem to be too many. I was told only one maid is needed. We plan to select just one from among them, my lady. At that, the corner of Nok-soo's mouth curls into an eerie smile. Select, you say? How about this, then? Pardon. Is the head cook here? Naksu raises her voice, calling out abruptly. The head cook, also called Jebu, the top chef of the Surigan in modern terms, akin to a head chef. A middle-aged man with a white headscarf hurries over and bows deeply before Naksu. Yes, Lady Suk Young. John Se-ho, head cook, at your service. How far along are the preparations for His Majesty's meal today? Well, we just finished preparing the ingredients. Perfect. Naksu turns to the women and the chief overseer. A maid serving His Majesty's meals must explain the dishes, keep the soup warm, and manage various aspects of the meal. To do so, they must know how to cook, correct? That is so, my lady. You said these are all daughters of noble families skilled in cooking? Then it's only fitting to judge them by their culinary prowess. Let's select the Surigan maid based on the dishes they prepare today. A wise decision, my lady. Unable to refuse, the chief overseer bows, and Naksu's eyes gleam with an unsettling light. But it wouldn't be proper for the unselected women to return to their homes. They say a palace maid leaves the palace only in death, don't they? What, do you mean? The chief overseer looks up at Naksu, her eyes trembling. From now on, these women will each prepare a dish for His Majesty's table in their own way. And Naksu's red lips curl into a chilling smile. Except for the one whose dish is deemed worthy of His Majesty's table, the rest will face execution. Chapter 8. The Royal Kitchen, 1. What in the world is Naksu up to now? Upon hearing the hurried report from an eunuch who had been spying on the events unfolding in the royal kitchen, Im Sahong trembled with rage. We went through all the trouble of conducting the Chai Hon, and now she's trying to take charge as she pleases? Calm yourself, father. Once the women have set foot in the palace, isn't it, however distasteful, under the jurisdiction of the inner court? Im Sung-jae soothed his father in a low voice, though he himself was far from at ease. The inner court, named Yingbu, the domain of the women residing in the palace, was akin to an extraterritorial zone within the palace walls. No matter how high-ranking a court official, palace law strictly prohibited interference in its affairs. But isn't the head of the inner court none other than the queen herself? With Her Majesty present, how dare a mere concubine like Jang Suk-yong act so brazenly? Jang Suk-yong holds His Majesty's favor entirely. Even Her Majesty can only watch in silence, nursing her grievances. Im Sahong clicked his tongue in displeasure. That base courtesan who sold her body on the streets should never have been brought into the palace in the first place. But father, it was because His Majesty took an interest in that lowly woman that I was able to secure his complete trust, was it not? Im Sahong's face soured, but he couldn't deny the truth in his son's words. The king's unwavering trust in Sung-jae's Chai-hon selections had begun after Sung-jae had elevated Jang Naksu, a mere street courtesan, into the palace by falsifying her background. And yet, that vixen Jang Suk-yong, ungrateful for the favor of being brought into the palace, dares to use us? The audacity! But father, what if I were to find something even more intriguing for His Majesty than Naksu? At that, Im Sahong looked at his son with a sudden realization. Then, could it be that you brought that strange kitchen woman instead of Governor Han's granddaughter? Sung-jae nodded slowly. Bringing Governor Han's granddaughter was merely Naksu's scheme. Why should we play into her hands? Instead, I discovered something far more significant there. If Sung-jae's I deemed it so, it was likely true. Sung-jae and the king had been childhood friends, inseparable since their youth. No one in the kingdom knew the king's tastes and habits as intimately as I'm Sung-jae. Well, then. If there's a true treasure His Majesty desires, it's the woman who prepared that meal. So, that peculiar woman is the key to diverting His Majesty's attention from Naksu's grasp. Im Sahong gazed at his son with newfound admiration, letting out a hearty laugh. Yet, Sung-jae still harbored a lingering unease. But we mustn't forget that fox like Jang Suk-yeon is far shrewder than we anticipated. She won't go down easily. Then, I can't just sit idly by. As if struck by a sudden idea, Sung-jae leapt to his feet and hurriedly headed somewhere. The dishes for the royal table must be completed within 1 gak, approximately 30 minutes. The bell at Heungjeong Pavilion will signal the start, so begin then. Standing before the gathered women, Naksu explained the rules of this bizarre and cruel selection process. For a concubine of only 3rd rank to decree execution within the palace was unthinkable under normal circumstances. But when the speaker was Naksu, it was a different matter entirely. This was the same ruthless woman who, for the mere offense of stepping on her skirt, had ordered the renowned courtesan Ok Jiwa's head be severed and displayed to the palace maids. If Naksu spoke of execution, it was no idle threat. The women huddled in a corner of the surigan were already trembling with terror. The ingredients are laid out before you. Take what you can reach first, though I can't guarantee there's enough for everyone. As Naksu finished speaking, the bell from Heungjeong Pavilion rang out in the distance. Dang! Even hearing the bell, the women hesitated, still unable to grasp the reality, glancing nervously at one another. Watching them, Naksu's lips curled into an eerie smile as she spoke softly. What are you waiting for? Run! Her words were like a trigger. The women surged forward, scrambling for the ingredients like ravenous beasts. And watching this chaos unfold with amusement, as if it were a spectacle for her entertainment, was one person alone. Naksu, seated with one knee raised, merely smiled. Ji Yang felt her head spin as if the world were tilting. Another cooking contest, here of all places. It hadn't been long since she narrowly escaped death, and now she was pushed to the edge of a cliff once more. Since losing consciousness on a road outside Paris, not a single moment had offered her peace. Why? Why was this happening? Was any of this even real? Questions spiraled in her mind, but the sudden toll of the Heungjeong Pavilion bell snapped her back to reality. Time was passing, even now. Every second that ticked by put her at a greater disadvantage. As her dizzying thoughts gradually cleared, Ji Yun began to piece things together. From what I've heard, the woman called Lady Suk-yeon is Jang Naksu. That means this is Joseon, during Yeonsan-gun's reign. Of all times, she had landed in the worst possible era, especially as a palace maid. For now, the only way to survive was clear: cook with everything she had. She had to accept that reality and do her best. Ji Yang belatedly rushed to the ingredients and examined them one by one. Even in the surigan, where the finest delicacies from the 8 provinces were gathered, this was still the Joseon era. The variety of ingredients available was laughably limited compared to the modern world. Moreover, the rare and expensive ingredients had already been snatched up by the quicker women, leaving only the ordinary ones behind. Ji Yang opened the lids of a few gourds tucked in a corner, sniffing their contents. In that moment, a recipe flashed through her mind. Human taste buds are fundamentally the same. What worked where I came from should work here too. The first ingredient Ji Young chose was a cleaned chicken. As the saying chicken instead of pheasant suggests, in Joseon, pheasant was far more prized than chicken. Chicken was, quite literally, a substitute for the more valued bird, making it relatively easy to secure. In addition, Ji Yang grabbed a few eggs, vinegar, a pinch of salt, sticky rice flour, and a bit of wheat flour. She also took an entire gourd she'd been eyeing. My guess was right. This is rapeseed oil. Ji Yang selected the smallest cast iron pot and poured a generous amount of rapeseed oil into it. The surigan cooks, unaccustomed to seeing so much oil used, stared wide-eyed, but Ji Yang paid them no mind. The key is speed. Can I finish in time? While the oil heated over the fire, Ji Yang cracked the eggs, separating the yolks and placing them in a small bowl. She added salt and vinegar, then began slowly pouring in oil while whisking with a spoon. Naksu observed the bizarre cooking contest unfolding in the surigan with a piercing gaze. Her eyes soon fixed on one spot. The chief overseer quietly approached her side. How will the dishes for the royal table be judged? They must be satisfying to His Majesty. Who would know that better than the one who attends him in his chambers every day? You mean? I will decide what goes on the royal table. Do you have someone in mind, then? A strange smile flickered across Naksu's face as she stared intently at something. How could I decide who lives before tasting the food? Her gaze was locked on Ji Yang, diligently whisking a bowl with a wooden spoon. But I think I know who needs to die. Ji Yang paused her vigorous whisking and peered into the bowl. A thick, creamy white mixture. When lifted with the spoon, the dense blend formed a horn-like peak. This texture is perfect. Ji Yang dipped a finger into the mixture and tasted it. A rich, savory flavor spread through her mouth. A unique sauce, made by emulsifying eggs with oil and vinegar to create an airy texture. Mayonnaise was complete. To modern people, it was a familiar sauce, but in this era, its texture and flavor would be entirely new. But this was just the beginning. The real cooking was yet to come. With swift movements, Ji Yang mixed the sticky rice flour and wheat flour with water. Scooping it with a spoon, she confirmed the batter was appropriately thin and smooth. This consistency is good enough. The Heungjeong Pavilion bell tolled again. A gak had already passed. Shaking off the dizziness, Ji Yang steeled herself. Hesitate even a little, and I'll fail. She dipped a chopstick into the freshly made batter and let a drop fall into the hot oil. The batter quickly formed a round lump, sinking to the middle of the pot before rising to the surface. The speed at which the batter rises indicates the oil's temperature. This is hot enough to try. Ji Yang took the salted, pre-cut chicken pieces and poured them into the bowl of batter. Stirring with chopsticks to coat them evenly, she carefully placed each piece into the scalding oil. Sizzle! The kitchen filled with the sound of sizzling oil and rising smoke. The Heungjeong Pavilion bell rang once more. Stop! Naksu's sharp voice cut through before the bell's echo faded. The surigan, littered with scattered ingredients from the frantic cooking, looked like a battlefield ravaged by war. The only one with a composed expression was Naksu, strolling leisurely through the chaos. Now, shall we taste the dishes? Since they're for His Majesty's table, I'll inspect them myself. As she spoke, Shuwol, the supervising palace lady, presented a pair of silver chopsticks wrapped in silk. Naksu took them and slowly approached the prepared dishes. Ji Yang watched with bated breath. Was it her imagination? For a brief moment, as Naksu's gaze met hers, she thought she saw a strange smile. No way. A chilling sensation gripped her heart. What if Naksu had been targeting her from the start? No matter how well she cooked, if Naksu deemed it unsatisfactory, that would be the end of it. This so-called cooking contest was nothing but a trap in disguise. That can't be. Just as Naksu's silver chopsticks reached for the first dish, a loud, resonant voice echoed through the surigan. His Majesty arrives. It wasn't the voice of the chief eunuch who always accompanied the king. But to Ji Yang, it wasn't entirely unfamiliar. The one most startled was Naksu. Her pale face contorted with irritation as she turned sharply. There stood Yeonsan-gun, the chief state counselor. How could His Majesty miss such an entertaining event? As if in agreement, a figure nodded and slowly emerged, clad in a crimson ganryangpo. Who could argue with that? To think such a fascinating spectacle awaited here. Seeing him with her own eyes, Naksu's red lips twitched faintly. The king, Yeonsan-gun, had entered the surigan. Chapter 9. The Royal Kitchen, 2. So, I just taste each one and choose the one I like? That sounds amusing. Yeonsangun strolled toward the 10 bronze dishes lined up on one side of the surigan. Each dish held a freshly prepared Yeosan royal meal. All of these were made by the girls brought in this time, I presume? Indeed, Your Majesty. I made sure they were prepared with special care, knowing you'd enjoy them, Naksu purred, sidling up to Yeonsangun with a coy giggle. Her demeanor was so flirtatious that it was hard to imagine the cruel expression she'd worn moments ago. Yeonsangun reached for the first dish, picking up a piece of food and popping it whole into his mouth. His actions lacked the dignity of a king, instead resembling the eager curiosity of a boy devouring snacks. A delicacy, indeed. The all-powerful ruler savored the dishes on the trays one by one, smacking his lips. Oh, this one's tasty too. And this one's quite good. With the king sampling each dish before them, the women gathered in the surigan trembled like aspen leaves, unable to even lift their heads. The only one unshaken was Ji Yang. For her, curiosity outweighed fear. The man standing before me, the worst tyrant in Joseon history, and its greatest gourmet, Yeonsangun. She didn't dare stare openly, instead stealing glances by subtly shifting her eyes. The silhouette of the man in the crimson ganryangpo. Though his features weren't fully visible, his pale skin and tall stature stood out starkly. At that moment. Oh. This is an entirely new taste. Yeonsangun suddenly exclaimed, lifting one of the bronze dishes. On it was the dish Ji Yang had just completed. Fried chicken, coated in a sticky rice flour batter and crisply fried, served with a side of mayonnaise. Sticky rice fried chicken with mayonnaise sauce. In typical Joseon-era cooking, oil was used sparingly, at most for pan-frying items like pancakes. While there was a dish called pogi, roasted chicken, it was merely pan-fried in an oiled skillet. Even a king would never have tasted food submerged and fried in a pot of hot oil, a deep-fry technique. This wasn't just any fried dish, either. It was fried chicken, coated in a sticky rice flour batter and crisply fried in rapeseed oil. For someone in this era to encounter fried chicken, a dish modern people go wild for, and feel nothing would be stranger. As Yeonsangun bit into the crispy chicken leg, a sharp crunch echoed thrillingly through the surigan. This texture, this flavor, this savoriness. Yeonsangun let out a moan-like sound, as if enraptured. Oh, Your Majesty, try the other dishes slowly too, Naksu interjected, tugging at his sleeve to divert his attention. She wasn't oblivious to who had made that dish. But the king was still lost in the flavor of Ji Yang's chicken, unable to pull himself away. This, its very foundation, is a completely new taste. Isn't this a delicacy of the realm? The crisp fried chicken, paired with the rich, savory mayonnaise, was nothing short of a cultural shock for Yeonsangun, accustomed to the refined, understated flavors of palace cuisine. Catching the moment, Im Sung-jae's face lit up with a triumphant smile. Your Majesty's discerning eye truly sees through to the gem in the mud. To think you'd recognize the dish I deliberately brought for you at once. So, you're saying you were testing me, the king countered. Sung-jae, still smiling broadly, deftly deflected. How could I call it a test when I knew this would be the outcome? Please see it as my loyal effort to bring Your Majesty a small joy. As expected of the great Im Sung-jae. No one knows true pleasure as well as you. I am humbled, Your Majesty. Then, may we decide that the maid for today's surigan will be the one who made this dish? That is only fitting. Yeonsangun took another crunchy bite of the chicken leg, his face radiating satisfaction. It was the expression he wore when he was in the best of moods. Naksu, who served him most closely, knew that look well. Even for her, seeing it was rare. The realization sent a deep, twisting pang through her. Where is she, the one who prepared this extraordinary dish? I wish to see her. Yeonsan-gun slowly approached the group of women bowing low in a corner of the surigan. Who is it? The one who made this dish? As Ji Yang hesitated, about to respond. Oh, Your Majesty. Naksu suddenly grabbed Yeonsan-gun's arm, pulling him back. Having watched the scene unfold, she was far from calm. Sung-jae, and this mysterious woman he brought, were not only disrupting her carefully laid plans but also swaying the king's heart. I can't let this go on. The king's attention mustn't linger on this new amusement. You've stayed too long in this lowly place. It's not fitting for a king. Shall we return to your chambers now? No, it's quite entertaining. Why rush? Oh, Your Majesty, you must maintain propriety. As Naksu cooed and flirted, Sung-jae quietly added, as Lady Sukyeom says, Your Majesty. Instead, I'll ensure tonight's royal table is prepared solely with dishes made by the girl I brought. We must hurry to meet the timing, so please proceed to your chambers and anticipate a feast of the realm's finest. Oh, that's a fine idea. As expected, you know my heart better than anyone. I am humbled. Come quickly, Your Majesty. As Naksu led Yeonsan-gun out of the surigan, she shot Sung-jae a piercing glare. The threat in her eyes was unmistakable. But it didn't sting as it once had. For the first time, those usually icy, meticulous eyes betrayed a hint of anxiety. Proof I've found a way to sway His Majesty's heart. Once the king was out of sight, Sung-jae approached the group of bowing women, heading straight for Ji Young. Her wavy brown hair made her easy to spot. He roughly grabbed her arm, pulling her into a secluded storage room inside the inner kitchen, away from prying eyes. After ensuring no one was watching, Sung-jae gripped her chin, tilting her face up. Well, this is surprising. I had my doubts, but... His narrow eyes gleamed eerily. It seems I've truly stumbled upon a treasure. Ji Yang, feeling a wave of discomfort, jerked her head away, shaking off his hand. Back at the Gyeonggi provincial office, she hadn't caught his name amid the chaos. But now, she was certain. Thanks to her father's love of history books, the name Sung-jae wasn't unfamiliar. Though she didn't know the details, she knew he was a notorious villain, a treacherous minister who rounded up women to offer to Yeonsan-gun. And wasn't she herself one of those women, dragged here against her will? Your name, it's Ji Yang, right? If I hadn't brought His Majesty here, you'd have been killed by Lady Sukyeong. You realize that, don't you? Ji Yang wasn't oblivious. The chilling look in Jang Naksu's eyes when they met hers had told her instinctively, this absurd selection was a pretext to kill the women gathered here, including herself. You narrowly escaped today, but Lady Sukyeong will surely continue to target your life. Don't you think you need an ally in this palace? So what are you getting at? Stop beating around the bush and speak plainly. Sung-jae froze for a moment, stunned by her sharp retort. A newly arrived palace maid daring to speak so boldly to a third-rank official? But perhaps such boldness was fitting. For someone to be placed at the king's side. Why the fierce glare? I'm merely saying that since I'm responsible for bringing you into the palace, I have a duty to protect you. So, you'd do well to follow my instructions from now on. What nonsense! When did I ever ask you to bring me here? What? I didn't come here because I wanted to. Why should I follow your orders? You speak amusingly. But the palace is a place where you neither enter because you wish to nor leave because you want to. Not just you, not just me, perhaps even His Majesty is no different. With an eerie glint in his eyes, Sung-jae pulled a slender brush from his robe and began scribbling rapidly on a palm-sized piece of paper. As the brush moved, sharp, elegant characters filled the page. These are the dishes His Majesty favors. I've written down what I know, so study them thoroughly and prepare accordingly. I'll ensure you can use the surigan freely, so don't worry about restrictions. Why are you going this far? What? You've already done your job by dragging women to offer to the king. Why keep meddling? Ji Yang clearly didn't trust Sung-jae. And why would she? She'd been kidnapped, essentially. Sung-jae, as if resigned, began to reveal more of his intentions. You saw Lady Suk-yeon, didn't you? I'm the one who brought that former courtesan into the palace. Looking back, it was like letting a tiger cub loose. You brought Jang Nok-soo. Governor Hong of Gyeonggi earned her enmity by opposing her. That's why, as the Chaihong envoy, I went to his residence under the pretext of a guest reception to take his granddaughter. Governor Hong Eun-guk's father, the one who first found Ji Yang in this era and had her taken to the provincial office. The father and son had visited, and as a result, Ji Yang had been selected instead of the governor's granddaughter, landing her here. And that was originally Nok-soo's scheme? So, you and your father were just following Jang Nok-soo's orders? That's how powerful she's become. Do you think the things whispered between her and His Majesty in their bedchamber are trivial? Sung-jae gave a bitter smile before continuing. In the end, His Majesty's eyes and ears are blocked by the wall that is Jang Nok-soo. But there's a way to reach him without going through her. A way to reach His Majesty? His Majesty is the greatest gourmet in the realm, one who'd leap from sleep for a rare delicacy. If you, Ji Yang, serve at his table under the pretext of preparing meals, you could relay everything you learn to me. In return, I can help you. Though couched in complex terms, Sung-jae's proposal was clear. He wanted to use Ji Yang as a spy. Why should I follow your orders? Because if you don't, you won't survive this place. Whether aware of Ji Yang's growing confusion or not, Sung-jae's snake-like eyes gleamed sharply. Chapter 10. The Royal Kitchen, 3. Prepare the dishes based on what's written here, and you can't go wrong. Sung-jae thrust the scribbled piece of paper toward Ji Yang. When she took it, all she saw were haphazardly scrawled Chinese characters. In an era without dictionaries or computers, deciphering such hastily written text was impossible. Ji Yang set the paper down and confronted Sung-jae. What's this? You expect me to just read this? Would it kill you to write in Hangul? What? Hangul? It dawned on her that in this era, people wouldn't call it Hangul. Struggling to find the right term, Ji Yang blurted out the first thing that came to mind. You know, the script King Sejong created. Jie, Jaya, Gio, Jio, that stuff. You mean Yeon-mun? You, an outsider, know about that? As if I wouldn't. It's forbidden. What? His Majesty banned the use of Yeon-mun. It's been some time since he prohibited it, saying the ignorant masses were using it to write and spread seditious texts against the court. As expected of Yeonsan-gun, a move befitting his title as a tyrant. Ji Yang let out a light sigh. So what's your plan? Are you going to sit here and recite His Majesty's favorite foods one by one? Sung-jae furrowed his brow, visibly annoyed. But realizing he had little choice, he began scribbling Yeon-mun next to the Chinese characters on the paper. Though it differed from modern Hangul, it was legible enough when cross-referenced with the Chinese characters. That Sung-jae was willing to use the banned Yeon-mun showed his expectations of Ji Yang weren't mere empty words. But just as Sung-jae needed Ji Yang, she might need him too. I'll prepare tonight's royal table with these ingredients as a base. But I have conditions. Conditions? What are they? First, ensure the women who weren't selected today aren't punished. What? Jang Nok-soo arbitrarily declared that those not chosen would face execution. Someone of your standing could surely intervene, right? Sung-jae looked troubled but, after a moment's thought, nodded. No matter how powerful a concubine, with His Majesty having personally seen the women in the Surrogan, Naksu couldn't punish them without proper procedure. And any such procedure would require the cooperation of the chief state counselor, Sungjae himself, who handled the king's commands. I promise. But you must prepare an impeccable royal table to capture His Majesty's heart. One more promise. With your influence, finding an item shouldn't be difficult, right? Of course. Our family has sent envoys to the Ming Dynasty multiple times. I can procure anything from Joseon or even China. Then find me one thing. Promise me that, and I'll do my best to cook. An item? Ji Yang's eyes sparkled. A book. Get me Manganrock. Manganrock. When she first saw that book in a used bookstore in Wanghak-dong, her initial thought was, how has such a tattered book survived this long? Its cover was blackened with grime, frayed and worn. Mold speckled its pages, and it was riddled with tears and insect damage. It was a tenacious book, surviving countless hardships. It's almost certainly from the late 15th to early 16th century. Her father's old friend, a professor at a physics research institute, had concluded after examining it. Carbon dating confirmed the book was written around 1500 CE. Which means it was created in this very era. The opening lines of the book were tender, almost like a love letter. Though I seek, I cannot obtain. Day and night, my thoughts linger. This night stretches long and endless. Tossing and turning, side to side. At first, Ji Yang thought it was a Yangunga, a common literary work of the era expressing a scholar's loyalty to the king. But nowhere in the book was the author's identity mentioned. She could only guess it was written by a learned scholar, given the elegance of the prose. What was even more astonishing was the content. As mentioned before, it wasn't a scholar's anthology but a Joseon-era cookbook. In its impressionistic critique of food, it resembled Hyo Jaeun's Demundijak. Its detailed and varied recipes evoked Sangoarak, Suwonjapbang, or Yumsikdimabang. Yet Manganrock was unlike any of them. Its unique recipes were found in no other book. And that wasn't the only strange thing. When Ji Yang first found herself in a Joseon kitchen, the situation felt eerily familiar, as if she'd seen it in Manganrock. There's something to it. Her last memory in the modern world, just before losing consciousness on a Paris highway, was of that book, Manganrock. And now that she thought about it, the strangest part was its final recipe. Wonspan. A dish named Return to the World. But the page that should have contained its recipe was cleanly torn out. Perhaps an absurd thought, but perhaps that missing page held a clue to returning to her original time. Ji Yang knew her speculations lacked evidence or logic. But wasn't her inexplicable arrival in Joseon just as illogical? Something beyond reason and logic was at play. For some reason, Ji Yang felt an eerie certainty. If she could find Manganrock, she might find a way back to her world. I promise that too. I'll find the book. Sungjae's voice snapped Ji Yang out of her reverie. But you must absolutely captivate His Majesty's heart with this royal table. Fail, and not only the book but your life and the lives of all the women gathered in the Surigan will be forfeit. With that stern warning, Sungjae swept his robes and left the Surigan coldly. Ji Yang understood the situation. With things having come to this, she had no choice but to focus all her energy on preparing the royal table. She slowly recalled her knowledge of palace cuisine. The royal table is served 5 times a day, if I remember correctly. The earliest is the kojiban, early morning meal, typically light dishes like seaweed soup, rice porridge, or gruel to settle the stomach. Next is the jojura, the morning meal. Around midday, misai, 1 to 3 p.m., a light lunch of soup or snacks, called natjitsang, is served. After the king's duties end and he retires, the evening meal, suksura, is presented. Finally, late at night, a small meal called yatasobangwa is served. These 5 daily Jinseon, royal meals, were undoubtedly grueling to prepare. But the one requiring the most care was the evening suksara, which Ji Yang now had to prepare, the most lavish of the 5. Just moments ago, she'd barely escaped death, and now she had to cook again. Ji Yang sighed heavily, already overwhelmed by fatigue. Just then, several cooks approached, carrying a massive tray. The main tray, Daewonban, and the side trays, Soenban and Cheksangban. The suksara consists of 12 dishes across these 3 trays. 3 trays with 12 dishes? A large, heavy tray fit for a table of 4, flanked by 2 smaller side trays. She had to fill all 3 with the finest tributes from across the 8 provinces. All for a single king. Her head spun again. Wait, just a second. Ji Yang flung open the surigan door and bolted outside. In the past few days since arriving in Joseon, she'd lost count of how many times she'd faced death. She thought she'd survived by showcasing her cooking skills, only to now be tasked with preparing the royal table for that brutal king. And now, she was responsible not just for herself but for the lives of the other women brought through the Chaihong. Arg! Damn it, what is this madness? She slammed her head against the outer wall of the surigan, shouting in frustration. Suddenly, she sensed someone behind her. Turning, she saw an elderly man with white hair, hunched over, sweeping the courtyard with a broom. He'd been staring at her as if she were some rare creature. What are you looking at? Embarrassed at being caught in such a state, Ji Yang snapped. The old man grinned broadly. In 50 years of working in the palace, I've never seen someone yell like that. Ugh. I'm just going crazy. Ji Yang let out another sigh. A single dish was one thing, but how was she supposed to prepare an entire royal table for that ferocious Yeonsan-gun? The old man, sweeping away, nodded as if he understood, chuckling. Well, you must be the new palace maid in the surigan. Word's already spread like wildfire that you gave Jang Naksu a good thrashing. Word spread? Oh, 1 word in the palace becomes 100. The old man suddenly muttered something odd, as if talking to himself. By the way, it feels empty without the deer dung I sweep every day. Deer, dung? The late king raised deer in the garden with great care, but they say the current king killed the last one today. He killed the deer they raised? TCH. Such a shame, such a fine creature. Humming an unfamiliar tune, the old man shuffled off, sweeping as he went. He seemed to be a Ninobi, palace slave tasked with cleaning, perhaps a bit senile. A sudden spark flashed through Ji Yang's mind. That's it. Maybe that could capture the king's heart. Bursting back into the surigan, her eyes gleamed like stars. Cooks, light the fire in the hearth and prepare the evening suksara as usual. And tell them to bring the deer His Majesty hunted today to the surigan. That's the end of the web novel, Surviving as the Tyrant's Chef, Chapter 1 Chapter 10. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe to ComicLingo to catch the upcoming parts.